What's going on, everyone? So I've been getting the lay of the land as of late, talking to the community and, of course, asking some questions. And, of course, putting out some videos trying to get the opinion of what people think about set 3, where we're at in terms of Star Wars Unlimited, of course, answer some questions, and talk about the set overall. So we got a few things to talk about. Before we dive into all the major topics, I do want to talk about a couple of new cards that got previewed over the past couple days. There's not really that many, but I figured I'd throw them in there since we're here, talk about them pretty briefly, and then give my overview. Big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, and use my TCG player link in the description down below to pick up any of these cards, guys. Really appreciate you all. First off, new cards. First one resource event. I have the high ground. Love the flavor on these cards. Vigilance card. Choose a friendly unit. Each enemy unit gets -4/-0 while attacking that unit this phase. And the art is absolutely sweet. Someone I saw was like, wait until you see this in hyperspace. And I completely agree. I cannot wait to see this card in hyperspace. But this seems like a pretty interesting option. Of course, if you just pair it with the Obi-Wan leader, it works very, very well. As he is a sentinel, you can put your Obi-Wan leader on the high ground, and then any unit that's going to hit it is going to get -4/-0, either completely blanking their turn of attacks or just getting some really profitable trades in. However, I will say that despite this being pretty solid on like sentinel units or any unit that your opponent actively wants to kill, and you getting kind of like a one turn, what we would call a magic fog, basically removing all combat damage for that turn onto that unit. These types of effects where they require your unit to live through removal, through your opponent kind of actioning, and your opponent has to play into them, tend to be a little bit weak. This is cheap. It's one resource, and it does have a pretty powerful effect. I think this is something that could potentially be an option. I could see this being play. Let's say you are playing that new Obi-Wan leader, trying to heal up your sentinels. You play a sentinel. You have this in your sideboard against the decks that are just trying to aggro you down. You drop this, you fade a turn of attacks, or just get some really nice trades in. That could be enough to potentially win the game. Heck, you could even use this, hit something, heal up a little bit with the Obi-Wan leader, and do some value there. I don't think this is like an insane card. I think it could potentially be a sideboard option in the right matchup, but I would not have extremely high hopes for it. Second card we're going to talk about is Amita, and this is, I believe, the last card that was kind of spoiled after my videos the previous week. 2-cost ground unit in double command, 0/4 Republic official. Whenever you play another unit, you may exhaust this unit. If you do, search the top 4 cards of your deck for a unit, reveal it, and draw it. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and pretty interesting, to be honest. This does not require you to play Republic units, and that's really important because a lot of the Republic cards that we've been seeing tend to be cards that are like, you only get this value if you do the Republic thing or you do the specific synergy thing. Especially for a card that's in double command, you really need to be able to be playing cross-set cards. And if this just said, if whenever you play another Republic units, I would see this being a very weak option. However, because it could just be when you play another unit, I could see this getting a decent chunk of value. 0/4 means that it might not die to some of the earlier plays a decent chunk of the time, but a lot of people are big fans of Dr. Pershing, and this is kind of where I put Amita. You play it early on in the game, you do your thing, you kind of get this steady flow of card advantage. And while I don't think Dr. Pershing is like a great card, it is playable in some decks. I think that's where this card kind of fits in. You just play your deck, you play some more units after that, and you kind of just get the stable card draw coming out from your Amita. Again, it's on the same level of Dr. Pershing. So if that's not a card that you're interested in your deck, then this is definitely kind of in that same category. You're probably going to want to pass on this. And one of the big things is that since it is in double command, you're not playing like that Vigilance style. And that could be a big downside because I don't know if like Emperor Palpatine would want this. I'm thinking like double green Emperor Palpatine because remind you, it doesn't have to be heroism or villainy, but like double green Palpatine, you play this early. I suppose it's an official, so you could pair it with Emperor's Royal Guard and get that official going. And maybe that's good enough because you want to draw some extra cards. I can see this a sideboard option like double green Palpatine, for example. But overall, not like exceptional, just kind of on the same level of Dr. Pershing, and it could be fitted into some decks. But that's all the new cards that I hadn't gone over yet. Not crazy ones like we've been seeing in the past few days. The brand new bases are extremely exciting to me. And that's kind of where I want to transition into talking about the overall theme, overall view, and overall hype of set 3, kind of what looks to be expected, as well as answering one other question, that is Burnout with Star Wars Unlimited, because I've been getting actually quite a few questions about that, since I am one of the few creators that does post pretty much every single day. At least I try to. As you all know, if you've watched my previous videos, I do have a newborn, so sometimes I just gotta get no sleep and focus on that. However, set 3. So I've had a lot of people ask why kind of I'm a little bit more hesitant on some of these earlier cards released, as well as what my thoughts are on the themes. So first off, those kind of go hand in hand. The themes of the set being coordinate and exploit. These are mechanics that require you to have other things in play in order for them to function. This means that because set 3 is all about trying to put other things into play in order to enable these mechanics, we are going to have cards that are specifically designed to work with those, unlike the cards that we've had in set 1 and set 2. Now, this does two things. One, it's most likely going to be an underpowered set and compared to set 1 and set 2. And that might be surprising to you all that I'm saying that, but that is kind of what my initial impressions are. The second thing that means is that it really is going to be focused on trying to work with set 3 itself. And so we're not going to get a full idea of what we can do until we get a majority of the cards introduced. If you compare something like, well, let's just look at one of these leaders, or any of these leaders realistically. Padme with a coordinate ability, Ahsoka with a coordinate ability. Both of these require multiple units on the battlefield. General Grievous, we have focusing on specific droid units. Now, Maul and Obi-Wan are more general. There's also a couple of leaders like Count Dooku focused on exploits. We did have a lot of the leaders kind of be specific in set 1 and set 2 as well. If you think about like Bosk, who's only really working with bounties, or if you're thinking about, well, what's another one? Lando, who's only working with smuggle. There are some very specific stuff in regards to set 1 and set 2 leaders, of course. But this is a little bit different because the entirety of the mechanic itself, coordinate and exploit, do not function in set 1 and set 2 right now. So if you're trying to play like an Ahsoka aggro deck, let's just say, this is what you wanted to play, you wanted to kind of replace your Sabine deck, you will not really be able to activate coordinate in the current iteration of the game because we do not have the ability to produce multiple bodies on the battlefield. What that means is this leader right now looks pretty mediocre to me in terms of exploit. Like, well, I don't have a great example here, but let's say you wanted to use Count Dooku and you wanted to play cards like Separatist Super Tank. This, at the current iteration of the game, is one of the worst cards in the game. If you're looking at this and you're comparing it to the other 9, even 7 resource options for command villainy, or just command in general, you are going to absolutely blow Separatist Super Tank out of the water. Mind you, if you're paying 7 resources for this in the current iteration of the game, and I keep saying that because that's what we're kind of referring to here, you're going to find that you're defeating an actual unit. And whether that's like a 2 or 3 cost unit isn't really the point, in that that is a lot of value being sunk into one single card that doesn't really pay off that heavily. And so we need to see some really powerful setup pieces. And right now, that's what the early spoilers are all about. They're just showing some really big payoffs, you know, things like, well, not quite Separatist Super Tank, but I'm thinking things like, where's Gore? I don't even see Gore here. I might have passed by him. Let me see if I can find another one. Well, I guess you could say like Batch Brothers. This is a great setup piece. And then you have things that have great payoffs like Heavy, right? With a coordinate with Raid 2. These are the kind of combinations that we need to see. And until we see more of these setup pieces, think Battle Droid Escort, and then more payoffs like, well, I suppose Hailfire Tank, we really can't give a good rating, a good initial, I guess you say, impression outside of we'll have to wait and see how powerful these become. And already a lot of these cards are starting to shape up. And mind you, we have not gotten a lot of them. I believe it's like over 40 cards right now, which is just a small portion of the set, maybe like 15% of the total set. The cards that I'm actually way more excited about overall, and this is something that will change the entirety of the game. I've talked a lot about how set 3 is really focused in on itself. If you think about like the Rebel synergy cards like Leia, those cards are not going to get too much better with these future sets until they release a set kind of focused in around Rebels. And that's kind of how I feel about set 3. The exception to that, and the big exception, are the rare bases. For set 2, we had not gotten any additional rare bases. Now, we've already seen the command one, and we've seen the cunning one. The cunning one giving you +1 O tier leader units, and the command one, well, it's on the screen here, 24 HP. For whenever you deploy a leader, you get 2 battle droid tokens. I'll say this command one looks a lot less impressive in the overarching set 1 and set 2 kind of introduce or added to the pool when you're talking about these set 3 cards. The cunning one actually looks a lot more exciting when you consider the previous decks as well. Droid Manufactory could be the most absurd base from set 3, but again, that is a setup piece that we are waiting for the rest of set 3 to really see. The cunning base, I forget what it's called, I think it's Petronaki Arena. Getting that +1 O on leader units can really change the game for those double yellow aggressive decks that are currently playing a 30 HP base, and while that is, in some cases better, usually with these aggressive decks, you're going to want a base that's going to help you on that aggro plant, and that does. So those bases, I think, are going to have a bigger impact on the overall game than maybe even some of the aspects in set 3. And that is literally because all of these cards, and if you look at any of these, none of these cards, for the most part, I'm trying to think of any card that appealed to me. None of these cards I saw and was like, oh my gosh, that is just completely absurd for X deck. If you remember from set 1, we saw things like, or set 2, we saw things like Crate Dragon, Podamrin, Wrecker. Those cards just slotted in, and they ended up being absolutely absurd. Not to say that we're not going to get any of those, potentially, but there's no card yet that I've seen that is like, oh, Boba Yellow immediately wants that, right? I can't even consider Soulless One being a 1 resource, potentially 3/2 flyer, being good in Boba Yellow because you need droid units or General Grievous. That really hinders its options to be played. And the same thing goes with all of kind of the other cards so far. The only card that I'd say could potentially be interesting, and this is something that I've gotten to thinking about a little bit more, would be Darth Maul. And the only reason for that is if you give it Overwhelm, you could potentially hit their base for a ton of damage. Like if they have a battle droid token out, or let's say a 1/1/2/2, whatever it is, and you Overwhelm, you could potentially hit their base for insane amounts of damage if they have multiple units with low toughness. So that could be interesting to me. Outside of that, most of these are, well, kind of synergizing with themselves at the current moment. Even the leaders, with the exception of potentially Maul, I'm kind of excited about this one just because of the absurd power stat line on the flip side, doesn't really work with the rest of Star Wars Unlimited at the current moment. And so this is really a set, while the theme is absolutely amazing in terms of Clone Wars. I love that, and I think a lot of people, especially in the recent generations, are kind of more relating to that. The overall power level seems to be a little bit weaker because it's so focused in on the Republic set. And this is something that is just going to expand more and more as we get more sets in the game. Some sets, because they're kind of synergizing with themselves, are just going to be more powerful than others because some are more universal. And that's just the case with Shadows of the Galaxy working a little bit better with set 1 than so far set 3 is with set 1. Again, these are early impressions, and I said this earlier, but that's kind of my initial opinion. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was Burnout. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is really subjective, but I'm getting a lot of questions like, hey, you seem like you're having fun in all your videos when you do gameplay, when you sit down and play with other people, or, whatever it is, whenever you're chatting about Star Wars Unlimited. And that is 100% true in terms of I do enjoy the game. I'm having fun covering the game. I'm having fun making videos about the game. There isn't really a situation where I'm like, dang, I gotta sit down and make a video about Star Wars Unlimited. Now, in some cases, I don't want to edit the video and make a thumbnail for the video. And I know some people criticize my thumbnails just because they're traditional YouTube thumbnails. But hey, that's part of YouTube. I do just enjoy the Star Wars Unlimited part of things. And the main reason for that is I personally just love the actual lore of Star Wars. And for me, at least subjectively, seeing all the cards and being able to play the cards that I basically spent years upon years kind of learning about is really, really fun to me. Creating decks and building upon the specific themes that kind of relate to the lore of the character is just really cool. That's a big part of my enjoyment in the game. And so for anyone that's asking about Burnout, that probably won't apply to you because, well, that's something that you have to kind of just maybe have a personal interest in Star Wars for. So I can't really help you there. But in terms of just like actual gameplay outside of like the art and the lore of Star Wars and just enjoying Star Wars in general, not just card games, the big thing that really helps me in terms of the actual gameplay aspect is playing every deck that I possibly can. And this is something that not everyone can do because either A, you can only play in paper, or B, you don't, I guess those kind of go in hand in hand, but you don't play on like Carabas, you don't have access to Carabas, or you don't have any other way to kind of play a bunch of cards. Either you don't have the supply in paper, or you're unable to play on Carabas. Again, those kind of go hand in hand. But because I can play all the cards for free online at any moment and instantly queue up, it really is exciting because I've played every single leader. Now, I've played every leader, not a lot of some leaders, because some of them are really bad, like Hunter. Don't want to play that guy. But because I'm able to play all these leaders in all these different combinations, it just makes it more fun for me. When I'm able to find a deck that's a little bit off meta, play around with it, enjoy a few games, and then hop back over to maybe a meta deck or maybe trying different variations of that meta deck because people are playing it. All these things kind of, well, I guess you could say variance is the spice of life. And it's no different for Star Wars Unlimited. Variance is the spice of Star Wars Unlimited. So if you're ever having a problem with Burnout, just try throwing some cards together and try a different deck. I know for paper events, I initially started with Leia Red. I got really kind of bored. And you could say I was feeling some burnout in terms of paper magic. Because paper Star Wars Unlimited. Because one of the things with paper is I go, once a week usually, and I'll come in and get to play a few games. And I usually like to play more in paper I like to play the paper version than I do the online version, because I get to see, the reactions and I get to interface with my opponent and all that stuff. But playing the same deck can get a little bit old, especially when you get to actually play physically with the cards. I don't know what it is, but just something that I've noticed. And so while I had Leia Red, I just made a Sabine Green right after. And then with the Sabine Green, I transitioned into another Heroism Green deck. And then I ended up dismantling that, making Vader Blue. And then I made Palpatine Yellow. And I just cycled through random decks. And I kind of made the decks with whatever I had. Now, I have a reasonable collection because I ended up doing draft a lot with Star Wars Unlimited. That's something I really enjoy doing. But recently I played Hondo Blue in my event and I had no malls. And I was able to borrow a couple of them, but the other slots of the deck, I just kind of filled in with whatever I had. And that ends up being a little bit fun as well, at least the paper side of things. Online, I get to do whatever I want, just play whatever I want at any point. There's not really high stakes. And in paper, I just get to test out things and see my opponent's reaction when I'm playing some random card in my deck or some random deck for an event. And potentially taking down the event. So if anyone's feeling burnout, I will say, drop the game for a little bit, take a break. There's no reason to continuously play Star Wars Unlimited if you're feeling burnout or buying cards. Usually with the release of a set, it's exciting for like a month. You get to test out all the new things, and then the meta kind of situates itself, and there's usually a top dog. And in this case, it was Boba Yellow, Sabine Green immediately. But there's some other ones that kind of developed over time with Han Blue. If you're not enjoying any of that, just take a break, come back. Just if you want to, keep up with the cards. If you don't, just be surprised when set 3 comes out and then come back when the new set drops. As far as, card games go, that's usually the cycle of them anyways. If anyone's played like ARPGs like Diablo or Path of Exile, those games work the same way. A new season pops up, you play for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, you drop it, you come back for the next season, and it's the same thing. New mechanics, new things that happen, and in card games, new cards were released, new mechanics are released, and guess what? It usually reinvigorates at least most people's interest for a little while. So, thanks for watching, everyone. Just responding to some comments today and giving my overall thoughts and my overall feelings about Set 3 and Star Wars Unlimited in general. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the video. I kind of just did this randomly because I was just reading through comments. And actually, I'm recording this just before I'm about to upload it on the day. I ended up uploading a little bit later just because I was reading through comments and stuff randomly again. And I figured to make a video on those comments. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll see you all for the next one.